I'm going to pass the microphone over to Paul Boghossian, Professor Paul Boghossian, who we have with us today to give us a keynote speech. Mr. Boghossian, Professor Boghossian, is chair of the Department of Philosophy at New York University, Silver Professor of Philosophy, and runs one of, if not the most prestigious philosophy departments in the world. So we're delighted to have him here today. Mr. Boghossian is on our advisory council and has attended our events in the past, so I think he knows a little bit about how this goes. So we're delighted to have him here. Paul, if you'd come up, we'd love to have you speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. And thanks for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this. I'm very happy to celebrate knowledge and celebrate these 5 exceptional winners in various aspects, fields of social science, all of whom are trying to figure out the truth about some urgent, even if highly difficult, issues. And well, maybe that sounds a little quaint. Aren't we supposed to be in a post-truth era? Figuring out the truth seems very old-fashioned. And it's true that they have somehow or other been demoted in our social lives. And fortunately, though, there are still institutions like this one that value the pursuit of truth and knowledge and are willing to put their money where their mouth is. But the threat remains. And interestingly, though, that threat comes not only from mendacious politicians, but from the very institutions that are supposed to be the bastions of truth and evidence, namely universities. And it's important to understand why that is, and what might be done about it. What do I mean when I say that truth and evidence are actually, in some sense, targeted by academics within universities? So I started my 2006 book, Fear of Knowledge, which is roughly about these themes, by talking about a story that was first reported in the New York Times. It was called Indian Tribes Creationists Thwart Archaeologists. And it described a conflict that had arisen between 2 views of where Native American populations originated. Now, according to the standard, fairly well-confirmed archaeological account, humans first entered the Americas from Asia, crossing the Bering Strait 10, 12, 15,000 years ago. By contrast, some Native American creation myths hold that native peoples have lived in the Americas ever since their ancestors first emerged onto the surface of the earth from a subterranean world of spirits. Now, the Times went on to note that many archaeologists, as it put it, torn between their commitment to scientific method and their appreciation for native culture, have been driven, this is a quote, to a postmodern relativism in which science is just one more belief system. So Roger Anion, a British archaeologist who had worked for the Zuni people, was quoted in saying, "Science is just one of many ways of knowing the world. The Zuni's worldview is just as valid as the archaeological viewpoint of what prehistory is about." And another archaeologist from the University of Iowa was quoted as saying, "What we need is a different kind of science between the Western ways and Indian ways of knowing." And there are many such remarks that you can quote from very distinguished academics, mostly from the humanities and the humanistic social sciences rather than from the natural sciences. Now, on the face of it, you might think these are quite strange things for anyone to be saying, because on a factual question like, when did a certain type of creature first arrive somewhere, there's just going to be some fact of the matter. You know, you may not know what it is, you want to find out what it is, and there are better and worse ways of finding out what it is. It's called science, evidence, rather than, say, just storytelling or crystal ball gazing or whatever. And given that there is a fact of the matter, if you have 2 conflicting accounts of what that fact is, then one of them has got to be wrong. Maybe both are wrong, but at least one of them has got to be wrong. So this idea that, well, that's just as valid said of some conflicting view makes no sense. And the question is, how did smart academics get themselves into a position where they say strange things like this? Now, it could be that the explanation is some theoretical confusion, purely theoretical confusion. So, for instance, these days you will find a lot of people who think that the notion of what is true is to be equated with what is widely accepted to be true. Right? You will find the journalists are often saying this, they'll be interviewing someone, they'll say, now, is this a fact or is it just your opinion? Now, fact and opinion, you see, are supposed to be at different levels. There's opinion, which is at the level of the thinker. The fact is out there in the world. So why are they asking, is it a fact or is it just your opinion? What they really mean is it just your opinion or is it a widely accepted view that's backed up by credentials and evidence and so on? Now, if you think that truth itself is just whatever is widely accepted, then you might get yourself into a relativistic frame of mind because you'd think, well, we accept this, and then this other community accepts that. That's widely accepted there, this is widely accepted here. So we each have our own kind of truth. We each have our own truth. So it's a very natural slide from that equation to the kind of relativism that is expressed by the people I quoted. The trouble is that you cannot equate what is true with what is widely accepted to be true. If that were the case, then you could never have reason to change our collective minds, right? Because if everybody believes that the earth is flat, well, that means that the earth is flat. And then you don't need to change your mind about whether the earth is flat, because why would you change your mind about what's true? So it's not true that truth simply consists in what is widely accepted. Truth consists, well, we won't go into exactly what it consists in, but it's basically independent of you and your opinions about it. And your job is to discover it, not to construct it. But I think the source, that the thing that moves people to be relativists in this kind of way, even smart academics, it's really, the motivation is moral, okay? And it's two related motivations. They're laudable ones, by the way. I mean, you can easily empathize with what people are thinking. The first is that if there is an objective fact of the matter about something, then if you have two conflicting views, one of them has got to be wrong. And people are sometimes offended when you tell them that they're wrong, okay? So, especially when you're talking about people who have been as badly treated as Native American populations, there's a very strong motivation to avoid saying you are wrong. That's an understandable motivation. The other related one is that these notions of objective truth and evidence have often been abused. For example, advocates for colonial expansion would justify their projects by saying, well, we're bringing the superior knowledge of the West. And so it's such a great benefit. In a period that has quite rightly and decisively turned its back on colonialism, it's very handy to be able to say there is no such thing as superior knowledge. There are just different knowledges, each appropriate to its own situation. So these are the motivations. I think you'd have to be very callous not to feel their force. But nevertheless, I think you don't, messing with the notions of truth and evidence as a way of satisfying these moral motivations is the wrong way to go. About the colonial argument, it's enough to say, look, I don't care how superior your knowledge is. You're not justified in exploiting and oppressing people. I don't care how fancy you think your own theories are and how much better your own belief system is. So you have a perfectly good moral counter. You don't need to go relativistic on truth in order to be able to rebut the justification that people have offered for horrible colonial projects. As far as offending people goes, look, you should try to put everything as nicely as you possibly can and try not to offend. It's true, words can hurt, and in particular telling people that your view is wrong or it's not supported by the evidence can be hurtful, but I'm afraid that is a price that you ultimately have to pay, because if there is a fact of the matter and people are disagreeing, one of them is going to be wrong. There's just no way around that. I once had this ridiculous conversation with a very famous Italian philosopher who shall remain nameless, who was complaining about this very thing. Said, when you're an objectivist like this, you have to end up excluding opposite views. And I said to him, okay, listen, tell me, that door over there, is it open or shut? And sensing the trap, he says, I refuse to answer. Now that's the ridiculous situation you get into when you go down this path. If you're saying something, you're excluding something. That's just how it works. So the belief in truth and evidence lies at the foundation of everything else that we do or think. To try to mess with those notions in order to be nice to people is a disastrous idea. Better to just be nice to people. Thank you.